Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am your host, John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. As I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. What a day. What a time. So much going on, and I want to deal with some of these issues with you directly. Trump says the ceasefire is over. Well, he says he thinks it's over, but it's over. Have you been following the news? I want to remind you, I took a lot of heat several weeks ago when I suggested that this agreement was Munich, that it was a surrender, that the Iranians got everything they wanted. And a lot of you said, oh, no, John, you have to trust Donald Trump. Trust him? Trust him? This is a guy who cannot seem to get his strategy together. And let's be clear, the assaults taking place now, Iran hitting American targets in the Middle East, including in the Kingdom of Jordan and the Gulf states, the United States hitting back at Iran, there seems to be no end to the back and forth. But what is clear also is that the Strait of Hormuz is not open. That's right. Oh, there are some ships getting through, but it is not open. It is not open the way it was, and we are seeing the impact on the world market. And the simple truth, the simple reality is that Donald Trump's policy in the Middle East has failed. The Israelis today are very concerned about what's going on in Lebanon. Their concern is not with Lebanon's government. Their concern is with Hezbollah, which continues to attack Israel. And let's be clear about this. The agreement between the United States and Lebanon and Israel is a fine agreement, not particularly new, to be very honest. I remember previous agreements going back to the 1980s. But the simple truth is the war there has nothing to do with Lebanon's government. It has to do completely with Hezbollah. And the suggestion by the Trump administration that Syria come in and take care of Hezbollah is absurd. I can remember going to Lebanon years ago when there was a map on the wall and there was no indication of Lebanon. Why? Because the Syrians viewed Lebanon as a part of Syria. The idea that the new president of Lebanon, who is, well, hardly effective, would be the one to go into Lebanon and take care of Hezbollah is as absurd as declaring that there is now peace between Israel and Lebanon. And let's be clear about Iran. Iran continues to agitate wherever they are, and their commitment to the destruction of Israel remains firm. Remember when Donald Trump said, oh, the new leadership in Iran is more reasonable? Nonsense. I said it at the time. They are not more reasonable, and the problem persists. So the question becomes, what happens next? Well, certainly Donald Trump has a problem. The problem is that he is unable to solve the problem of Iran. Number two, it is clear that oil is not flowing and that gas prices are going to continue to rise. It is also clear to me that the United States has a serious problem of credibility. Who is going to trust the United States of America? When it comes to the Middle East, we have one stable ally, and that's Israel. Now, there are some who are critical of Benjamin Netanyahu. That legitimate criticism exists in Israel as well, left, right, and center. But the simple truth is that it wouldn't matter who was prime minister of Israel when it comes to the question of Israeli security, whether it has to do with Iran or Lebanon or battling Hezbollah. There is national unity in Israel about their one overriding concern, and that is the security of the people of Israel. And if rockets continue to fly, and if Donald Trump's word means absolutely nothing, well, the Israelis will have to do what they've always done, rely on themselves. I always remember, as I've repeated in the past, the words of Menachem Begin, who served as Prime Minister of Israel in the late 70s and into the 80s, when he said to Ronald Reagan, "We are not a vassal state, we are not a banana republic. Israel has a perfect right to defend itself." And for those here in the United States who suggest that aid to Israel should be cut, let me assure you of one thing. The Israelis need our help. But if, for some reason, America should cease to be the bastion of freedom that defends Israel, the Israelis will do it themselves. And frankly, they do it themselves now. They're not requesting American troops to fight for Israel. They're asking only for the tools to do the job. And they pay for those tools. So let's be clear. The Middle East is a mess, and it is a mess in large measure because of the actions of the Trump administration in recent months. No doubt about it. And Iran remains a problem. There's no question that Iran continues to have a military capability, despite the fact that Donald Trump said that capability had been destroyed. Their nuclear threat is vastly diminished, and that is a good thing. And that's because of the coordinated policy between the United States and Israel. But let's be clear, the Gulf states, our allies, are terribly afraid of what is happening. And that includes Jordan, it includes Bahrain, it includes Oman, it includes Qatar, it includes, my friends, all of the Gulf states with whom we have had a close alliance. And I believe it includes Saudi Arabia as well. The Saudi Arabian government, and by the way, let's remind everybody, the reason it's Saudi Arabia is because the Saudi family rules the Arabian Peninsula. If they failed to continue to rule, if they were overthrown, that would be the Islamic Republic of Arabia. It would not be Saudi Arabia. And the Saudis are concerned. They're concerned about the stability of the United States commitment. And so we have a whole other range of issues which have to be considered. I am pointing this out because the Middle East is a highly complex area. And we know that Iran's continued backing of the Houthis, of Islamic Jihad, of Hamas, and of other radical groups continues to destabilize the Middle East, and Iran has not stopped its meddling. And that, my friends, is a severe problem. So let us simply hope that in the days ahead, the Middle East somehow stabilizes. Oh, you heard the latest, by the way. Now Donald Trump has decided to boycott Spain economically because Spain did not participate in the war against Iran. What a short-sighted, irrational decision. You see, Donald Trump has a very simple philosophy. You either do it his way or you're not a friend. And I have to tell you, from our point of view, the United States of America, Donald Trump's foreign policy is a fiasco. And I believe sincerely that if Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor to the President, were able to speak freely, he would say precisely the same thing. You'll notice how quiet he is. And if you take a look carefully, when Donald Trump appears and Marco Rubio is behind him, you can see how uncomfortable Marco Rubio is. So this is something else which we have to consider. We do not have an administration of competent individuals. And I must say about our Secretary of Defense, who is Secretary of Defense and not Secretary of War, do you have any faith in Pete Hegseth? I certainly don't. But have you noticed again the quiet on the part of Congress? That, my friends, should be deeply concerning. Let me also indicate Donald Trump did nothing to reassure our NATO allies. And again, he talked about seizing Greenland. It's mind-boggling. And of course, the response of NATO, and particularly Denmark, is no way. We're staying right where we are. And I want to point out to you, this is another great failure of this administration. And then again, there's the story of the new Air Force One, so-called, from Qatar, which President Trump is not flying out with. He's going to use the old Air Force One. And although he says it's because people wanted to see it and so he's flying it to air bases, we know that isn't true. There was a real concern about the president's security, and therefore he's reverting to the old Air Force One, which has the necessary security precautions. The fact that the president can't even be honest about a simple thing like Air Force One, well, that may say it all or encapsulate it all. We're going to continue to watch the foreign policy erosion of this president and the fallout from the NATO conference and, well, what happens in the Middle East. In the next several days, it'll be very interesting to see whether or not there can be some stabilization. I want to say a word about Maine and the fact that the Democrats are now choosing a new candidate for the United States Senate. I have not mentioned the name of the now disgraced former candidate of the Democratic Party. I think I'll maintain that policy. You all know who he is, and you know his name. But I want to be clear about something. The Democratic Party has to get its act together very clearly and very simply. But it's not only the Democrats who have to get their act together. Republicans have to do the same thing. And so Maine is going to be a test. And what is the test? Who will control the United States Senate? Maine plays a big role in that. So let's hope that the Democrats in Maine come up with a suitable candidate. I want to say a word about Mitch McConnell. You understand that Mitch McConnell is absent from the Senate, and his lack of presence means his vote is not available. And that, by the way, creates havoc for the Republicans. The Republicans have serious issues about what they are going to do if a serious vote were to come up. They won't have the votes without Mitch McConnell. And by the way, they're very concerned about Susan Collins as well. So these are real pressing issues dealing with national security and control of the United States Senate. I want to say a word, if I can, about the question of a candidate for office withdrawing his candidacy or suspending his candidacy without any admission of the reasons why he had to withdraw. The idea of sexual harassment occurs on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans. I'd remind you that Bob Packwood, the longtime senator from Oregon, who was an extremely effective senator, lost his credibility because of sexual harassment. And Bob Packwood just died a few weeks ago. I want everyone to understand very clearly that we cannot tolerate that kind of action by Democrats or Republicans. And it is, by the way, a nonpartisan situation. It happens on both sides of the aisle. The charges of rape, the charges of molestation, all these things have to be taken into account. And this process of selecting a new candidate in Maine is going to be a fascinating one as it unfolds. The Democratic Party has a challenge. It has to have a candidate who is credible and who can wage an effective race. So, as you can see, there is a lot to discuss, a lot to talk about, and a lot to be concerned about. And these are issues which we have to confront without any question. I am going to be watching this week to see carefully what Donald Trump and his administration proceed to do in terms of world politics. I want to explain. I had a question submitted by a listener, and I know we normally do this tomorrow on Friday, and we will. But there was a question which came up that I want to answer today. Can the Supreme Court remove the President of the United States? The answer is no. The only body that can remove a president is the Congress. The House by impeachment, which is an indictment, and the Senate by a trial and conviction. And that has never happened in our history. But may I tell you that when I look at Donald Trump, all the reasons for impeaching a president are there. The votes to remove him from office in the Senate are not. And that, my friends, is the end of the story. We are going to have Donald Trump in office for as long as he can survive and complete his term. Unless something dramatic happens, Donald Trump will be our president, and we'll be talking a lot about how he conducts the presidency and what happens next. So we're going to watch the Middle East. We're going to watch what happens in Greenland. We're going to watch what happens in Maine. We're going to be watching a lot of things because, my friends, the political world continues to spin, and I will be back tomorrow with your questions and more on Around the Political World with John Rothman. I want to hear your thoughts on today's episode. You can write me a review on Apple Podcasts, drop a comment on YouTube or Spotify, and click any of the links on the show notes to connect with me on social media. And I do want to urge you to submit your questions for tomorrow. Gogo Zoger and her able staff are going through them and will mail them to me, and I will then proceed to answer tomorrow. Remember to share this episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand. And of course, I'll be back with you tomorrow with more right here on Around the Political World with John Rothman. This show's been getting so much positive attention that we're delighted with the advertising support. This will help us to create more opportunities for Around the Political World with John Rothman. I want to say a special thank you to Gogo Zoger, who does such a great job of keeping us on track. Thank you, Gogo, and to all of you, get your questions in. I'll see you tomorrow, and heaven only knows where the world will be spinning, but I can tell you one thing, you and I will be right here on Around the Political World with John Rothman. See you tomorrow.